So the words of inspiration I'm taking from your first song, which was Thunder and Lightning. I hope we can create enough rigor on the panel today. So thank you, audiences. Thank you for your attention. And thank you, panelists, for being here. So what I'll do is, I just thought of a warm-up round. So you can understand our panelists better. So the quiz is that I'm going to ask them, what is that one word that describes them best and why? So that's a quick round. I will start with you, Khyati.
Hi everyone. Firstly, thank you to the AIM team for inviting me to be a part of the panel today. So Suchita, to your question, I think the one word that best describes me is organized. As boring as it sounds, that's how I am, generally methodical in how I approach things. I believe that way of operating helps me save my time and energy, right? So yeah, organized, but obviously motherhood has taught me that, no amount of planning can help it. When it has to, it'll all go down the drain in a jiffy, right? But that's just how I'm wired. Yeah.
Thank you. Over to you. Yes, Jyoti.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Hello, everyone. It's a very tough question for me. That's what I was telling her just now.
It seems easy, but it's a lot of thinking.
Yeah, so I think one word that I would say would describe me would be courageous. And that just comes because out of passion. When I'm passionate about something, I think I become a lot more courageous when I start talking about it quite a lot. So, please bear with me if you think that, I go all over the place today and get very excited about it. So that's pretty much
Sure, you just can bring your own self to the panel today. Over to you, Marsh.
Thank you. So I thought about it long and hard, and I realized the only one word that I could think of is I'm a woman. I mean, I'm everything. I am shy some days, bold some days. There are days when I'm very confident. There are days when I'm absolutely scared, like right now. But, yep, that's what, a woman. Thank you.
Thank you, Marsh. I think that's a very candid one from all three of you. I'll take a dig at this as well. So the word that best describes me is yin and yang. I don't know how many of you all are familiar with this word, but that's what I have as a tattoo as well. And that's basically getting the masculine and the feminine energy together. And that's the Shiv and Shakti coming together, which is the best representation of who I am and the energy I bring. So great, thank you. So we get started with the panel now. The topic, yes, it's an interesting topic, saying gender diversity targets, whether it's progress or tokenism. I will encourage the panel speakers to either represent their own views or the views of the organization you represent, right? So just a quick on context setting. So according to McKinsey's Women in Workplace 2023 report, ever since 2015, there's been an increase in the C-suite representation, especially women in the C-suite representation. It's gone up from 17 to 28%. So a big round on that from all the audiences. But is that good enough? I'm sure not, right? There's a lot still to be done, and we're going to be talking around that. So women are more ambitious now than ever, and the workplace flexibility is fueling that. There have been hard-fought gains that have women representation at workplace, but there are some myths, and this report I was reading through actually talks about 4 myths, and I thought we should start this discussion with those 4 myths, because I'm sure my speakers are going to probe more into that. So interestingly, women, and the first question was, and I'm going to open that to the audience as well, the first myth is women are becoming less ambitious. Do you think it's true or false? Just, if you think we are less ambitious, raise your hands to that. Great, I don't have a single hand up here, so thank you. So that's a myth that the report is tackling, and I thought it was very interesting when I read it. because it says no, women are not less ambitious, especially after COVID, with a lot of flexibility coming to work, women are actually being able to juggle better and balance. The second myth was that the biggest barrier to women's advancement is the glass ceiling. So I started my career almost 23 years ago. And since then to now, I can see so much more happening as far as diversity is concerned at workplace. There's a lot of consciousness around it. So I think this myth is also broken. The third one is microaggressions have a micro impact, which is not true, because microaggressions, which means suppression at workplace, has a large-scale impact, and that also is a big myth that's broken. The fourth one is again an interesting one, that it's only mostly women who want flexibility and remote working. That's not true. A lot of men are asking for that as well. So how do you think these four myths are, and how much do you relate to them, is what I'm going to open up with the panel speakers here. And that brings me to my first question, and probably I'll start with you, Khyati, is how can gender diversity targets ensure that women are adequately represented and empowered in decision-making roles? You can give me examples in your real life or from your organization.
Yeah, I think since the last 2 days, enough has been quoted in terms of stats.
Just hold your mic a little closer.
Is it audible now? Yeah, sorry. So yeah, this is my first time, so please bear with me. Yeah, I think over the last 2 days, there's been enough stats quoted in terms of how we've made progress, but still there's a glaring gap when it comes to a healthy representation of women at all levels, right? See, I'll just share one personal anecdote, right? There was one women employee who joined my team. Later, she remarked to me that it was very surprising for her that her technical interview round at Tiger was conducted by a woman. So she's worked at 3 corporate firms in India prior to this, and this was her first time experiencing a women panelist as part of a technical round, right? And she said, I found that so empowering that here at Tiger, this woman had an opportunity to make a decision to hire, right? Now, I've been interviewing and hiring for more than a decade, so it was so normalized for me, and yet when she shared her story, right, it was quite insightful that there's still a lot of work to be done, right? In terms of coming to your question on targets, in my view, right, especially as an organization scales, having those diversity targets or goals for the early career folks especially becomes very, very critical, right? Because you need to have that pool of women from which you could move them into the subsequent senior positions, right? If you don't have enough of a pool, then who will you promote, right? And it gets harder and harder to bridge that gap as the organization continues to scale. I think the McKinsey report, articulated this problem as the broken rung, right? So it's very, very important that in how the targets can help at the early career level. Beyond that, one thing that we are doing at Tiger, right, beyond the early career targets, the problem is a bit more nuanced, and so the approach also varies. So we have this internal management reporting platform for our executive and the service line leaders, where they consume a lot of data and insights with respect to revenue, efficiency, and all the business metrics. That is where we did the first offline analysis, and now we are feeding into that same platform, so enabling data reporting and transparency on the women representation, right? So as a service leader, I can see the mix across levels, benchmarked against other service lines, the org average, the industry average, right? So today's leaders are savvy enough that they base their decision making on data. We ourselves, Tiger, is a company that is all for data-driven decision making, right? So just enabling that reporting and transparency can be very impactful, where you have the diagnosis there, and then the leaders proceed with the root cause analysis, right? So is it an availability issue? Or is it a competence issue? Is it a bias issue, right? And then you start solving for that. So targets are helpful, but in addition to that, there will be this nuanced approaches that we'll have to take.
Thank you so much. I think those were some practical scenarios you shared from your workplace. I'll move to our next speaker, and I'll ask Jyoti, how would you want to talk about it, either from Tesco, from where you represent, or your own thoughts on this?
Right. So these are my thoughts. Maybe wherever I'm referring to Tesco, I'll kind of specifically mention that. But I think this is a very important question. When we say targets, I think in our minds, be it, whichever, diversity we are talking about, gender or otherwise, it's more like the marginalized group, right? Why do we need targets? I think for me, when I start off, why do we need targets? It's like we should first understand what is, when we are talking about equity, when we are talking about inclusion, what is it that's bringing for us on the table? And I think there are a lot of studies that have happened where we know some of the obvious benefits that comes in when we have inclusion, right? Now, the moment you say we have got targets, that means you know why you have set the targets. Now, how are you communicating it to your to the people of the organization, to the folks? Because that's very important that everyone understands what's the rationale when we are saying that we are going to chase for these numbers. And what is it there for everybody in it? I think if we have set that groundwork right, then the what and how is something that, can be determined, that can be worked out together. And you can also bring in a lot of advocates along with it. So if you really have to have some targets, which I think every company should, ideally, yes, because looking at the benefits that we have, I don't think there should be an exception to this rule. Then you start looking at it, how do we have that commitment? Now, the organization has shown that I'm committed to follow those numbers. Now, how do we develop, those kind of advocates? And I think the best thing that can start is with your leadership, with your senior management, where they are the walking, talking role models. And once you have the advocates and your leaders, that sends a very strong message to everyone in the company that yes, we are serious about it and we want to chase those targets. That's how you can also show the accountability, right? And the moment, people start taking accountability, you'll start seeing the needle moving. Other things like, how do you ensure you streamline your recruitment practices? How do you ensure you have got a proper leadership pipeline? How do you do your trainings? I think all these things would follow. But for me, the important thing is, how do you set the context? How do you set the stage? Let everyone be aware so that I think there are many things which comes in with allyship, backlash, all such things can be taken care of if that communication is transparent and open. Another thing which I think I would just like to mention is we talk a lot about mentoring. I think mentoring is important, but more important than mentoring is sponsorship. If we really want any of the diversity groups to really move forward, to have the right representation across groups, we should also have right sponsors with us who can really talk about you when you're not around, who can, advocate for you when you're not present. So these are certain things I think we can really do if we are looking, specifically at the gender diversity in particular, but even any other diversity if we really want to go for the cause.
Thank you, Jyoti. Very well said. And that brings me to Marsh to talk about women representation across levels in the organization and your thoughts around that.
Right. So there was this article I was reading about an NGO that went into one of the drought-ridden areas, and they saw that women were carrying pots of water and walking for hours, to carry water home. They wanted to help, so they pooled money, got the funding, and they built hand pumps right next to the women's houses, all right? So quite proud about themselves, water problem solved, women don't have to carry water in this heat. About 6 months later, they go back to kind of relish the impact that they've created. And they start talking to the women, and the women are pissed. And they were like, what happened? We solved your water problem. And they said that we used to get that 1 hour when we could leave our household work and go and talk, socialize, crib about our mother-in-laws, husbands, whatever, and that time you snatched away from us. So now it takes me 10 minutes to get water. I have more household work, household chores to do, and you've really not helped us. So that's about representation. It's so important that when we're talking about women for now, but when a gender is misrepresented, the results are skewed. And we see that everywhere. There's a policy that's being made on parental leaves, for example, but none of the people on the table have ever given birth to a child, have never adopted a small child, and if they are going to decide on what the parental benefits are going to be, it's not going to work out. So representation becomes extremely important, and therefore the targets. Now, do we want to keep these targets there forever? Probably not. I do dream of a world where gender diversity does not need a target, and it's a norm. But till then, I think every minority section will require a target. We also talk about how the representation improves the business processes. In 2014, Amazon had created an AI tool that would help in shortlisting resumes. So they would look at about 100 resumes, pick up the top 5, and you interview the 5 people and you hire them. But the issue was that the people who actually sat and made the tool were primarily male technologists, and the resumes that were submitted to Amazon in the last 10 years were mostly of male candidates. So the algorithm would automatically give a lower score to anything that said woman, woman's chess champion, and so on. So the representation right in the beginning was shortlist, cut out. And that is why the targets become very, very important for us till we get to the point when this becomes normal. Hiring, we have the same number of resumes, we have the right people for our candidates, right people for the jobs that are there, and not because they are a male or a female candidate. I'd like to just close this with the fact that all of this, for example, in Moody's, our CEO, Rob Fauber, his executive leadership team is 50% women. And I think it is just walking the talk. We are representing the market that we cater to. And this one happens at the highest level. It percolates down at every single level. So keeping that in mind, I think we'll stick to the targets for some time and hope we see a world where gender diversity does not require a target. Thanks.
Thanks, Marsh. I love the points you brought about, especially the story you told. Yes, there's always the other side of the story. Like, we think about women empowerment, but those women said that that was 1 hour of relief they were getting. Also the aspect of merging human and technology, because we can't be so dependent only on tech and say, these are the tools we'll put in place before hiring. So great points. I think all 3 of you all brought about great points. I'll move to another bucket where I'd like each one of you to share your views. That's on allyship. And, allyship is more about how do women get support from male colleagues. A lot of male colleagues, we have different opinions, right? People are sometimes extremely supportive, sometimes they are not. And luckily I don't have any male representation on the panel, so we can be as open and frank. What have been your experiences, especially, beyond simply the number of women in leadership? How can we measure true progress on gender diversity, keeping allyship in mind? What are things that organizations can put in place where everyone's supportive of more women representation across the board? I'll have Khyati share her opinion while the 2 of you can go after her. Thank you.
Yeah, so Sujata, your question is specifically on male allies, or in general, what can organizations do?
So male allyship necessarily, because that's where we need a lot of push. We've talked about general, organizational support, but this particularly with male allyship.
Yeah. So I think I'll share from my personal experience, right? So throughout my career, it's been a long journey, 2 long stints. Both times I've had male manager and who were my mentors as well, right? Fortunately, they were very, very strong allies. But one clear observation I have is that they are very progressive men in their personal lives as well, right? So it's not something they, sort of a persona they adopt at work. Naturally, they are progressive. They live the talk, along with their spouses and their families. And so naturally translates in office, right? So there are men, such men who are there, whom, we are definitely grateful for. But the wider pool is not wired that way, right? It's a part of the societal conditioning, how the backgrounds they come from. So that is, I think, a really harder problem to solve and a much more long-term thing. As part of organizations, the way we can influence is continue to have those conversations, asking the hard questions, and a more formal way that we've seen help is sensitizing them on unconscious bias, right? Again, these are, the way it's designed, there are workshops which are very, very introspective, where you articulate, put forth, and the realization dawns in, right? So those are the small changes that then they take away and they start reflecting when they're actually working on the floor, right? But like I said, there are very powerful male allies. I've been fortunate, but there's also a lot of work where we'll have to sort of enable men to become better allies. In Kiran ma'am's words, that is a project that all organizations should endorse. Yeah.
Thank you, Khyati. I think you touched upon that point, which is close to my heart. I've seen so much of social transformation happen in the last few years, that the social conditioning of what men can do at work and men can do at home, those lines are blurring. Men are taking more responsibility at home, and that's the self they get to work. So thanks for bringing that up. Over to you, Jyoti.
Yeah, sure. I would just take this question a different way. I see when you asked this question, and when we were over it, I was just looking, this hall. If you look at it, do we have all women, all men, or it's a mixed crowd? In my eyes, when I look at it, it's a mixed crowd, which I think is so very indicative, to me at least, that we have allies, of course, in the group. I don't think there are two hoots about it. There is any question about it, right? Everyone, we had, when we are setting up this event, even then we all had a great break just before we started. We see so many, at different booths of the companies, we see so many of our, male counterparts, our allies kind of standing there. And this is a D&I conference. It's all about inclusion. So I think we are pretty much there, where everyone understands that how important it is to be each other's allies. And I wouldn't say that women is not an ally to a man, as how a man is an ally to a woman, right? So in my mind, it's just that maybe over the years, how we have evolved as a society is now evolving even more. And with this evolution, maybe there would be some more time. There would be, some more, time that we have to kind of give to understand, for active listening, for open dialogues, to have, to understand where, are there any threats at all if you see some other diversity group coming up. So having that open mind, having a very open conversation, being an active listener, I think we are on the right path, where we are already having those allies with us. We just have to give them a little more, kind of, what shall I say, more authority, or, kind of give them some more responsibility, where they can run with this cause and not just, one group. If we think that we are the only ones, not really. We have the other side too, who's rallying for us. So why don't we rally together and see what hurdle comes in and takes it through? I think we have many success stories,
yes.
right?
Yes, it is the culmination of both coming together, and that was the yin and yang I was referring to as well. I'm glad you brought it up in a very different light and in a very encouraging manner, because yes, things are changing, the lines are blurring, and we do need to support men at work as much as men need to support women at work. So great point. And Marsh, I'm sure you're going to bring up something else now. Yeah.
Okay, so mostly I don't see resentment from male colleagues when we talk about gender diversity, right? There's a confusion. I've had male colleagues walking up and saying, so you want me to hire this female candidate because we have to hire women? Okay. That's not what we're talking about. When we talk about allyship, there are certain things as managers, leaders, male or female, we need to think about, right? One is pay equity. Everybody gets paid for the performance and the work that they're doing. Recruitment. As a manager, as a hiring manager, whether you're a woman or a man, look for equal representation. Okay, you should not have 10 male resumes versus 1 female resume. When you're hiring, make sure you're not biased enough to say, okay, this looks like I don't know, an HRBP role. Maybe women can do better here, right? This is very technical. Probably men can do better here. This is what is happening. If we look around, I've worked in 5 organizations till now. Most of the HRBPs are women. Now, it's not bad, right? But why? Most of the transformation, change agents, colleagues who are running fun activities on Friday, why do the women come up first? So those are things which you need to notice. And as male allies, I think the true ones are the ones who notice this, right? We went ahead with creating a 16-week parental leave policy. Now, this is not for women alone or men alone. The idea was because we did hear things like, oh, such and such person, she's pregnant, she's going to go on maternity, and maybe we should give this promotion to somebody else, right? Now, I'm sorry, both of them are going to go for 16 weeks. Please decide. So there's a leveling field there, and those are the things that we have to be careful about, and that is a true measure. Hiring 50% women will not help if you're not able to retain them. If they need to take a break, if they are going to leave the job because of personal issues, then that's a problem. Then your policies are not working out. When you have retained them, when you have women colleagues in your office, have you defined a growth advancement path for them? Is it well defined? Are they aware? Are they appreciated enough? And it's not, again, one gender versus the other. But if in a room full of 20 men, if there are 3 women and their ideas are, just silenced because there were other loud-speaking people, then that's where you need to be careful about and, make sure you recognize it, you appreciate it, and so on. And yes, say for example, in my case, if I have a team where there are a lot of women, I would prefer to go hire the men, again, to create that balance. So targets, along with, the allyship, it is a journey which, we're trying to work it out.
That's true, because, when we were discussing this, I remember talking to Avanti on this topic as well. This whole thing of whether it's just been put as an agenda or honestly every organization feels for it and does it. And there's a fair balance that one has to play because you've got to look at credentials as well when you're hiring. You just can't hire because it's a woman. And then after hiring a woman, you've got to see how the organizational processes, policies go to support that. So those are great points all of you all have made. That pushes me to move on to another very
Suchita, I
interesting...
just had one point
Sorry.
to add
Yes,
on
sure.
top of what Marsh said, right? So when you spoke about some of the men being confused in terms of how I remembered one anecdote where there's a lot of good intention also, but which can end up not helping the women, right? So one of my friends had this example where she had a young kid and her manager didn't consider her for an on-site opportunity where the male manager was thinking that he's being thoughtful. He's already aware about her situation and, it will not be practical for her to travel. And she was pretty miffed, right? She's like, who asked you to assume that, right? I would have liked to be asked even if my answer would have been no, right? So she did go and have that honest conversation. So I think both sides, like you mentioned, right? It's also, and he was open, right? Acknowledged his mistake. This is something I didn't realize, right? The benevolent sexism that it's called as. So these honest conversations as individuals collectively, I think a lot of us and women also to go and make men realize, right, where the intention would be misplaced. That is also an important part of allyship.
Very good. And just to add to it, I think if she had not voiced out, it wouldn't have been made clear that this was an assumption. So I think somewhere, even we also need to voice out what's right. Like as you said, sometimes your voices are not heard. Voice it out. I think I had an experience, very recent experience, where I was trying to raise something in a group, right? And of course that was not going right. So every time I would raise that concern, it was just put under the carpet, because there were a couple who were trying to work that through. There was another woman in the group of 20. Towards the end of 2 days workshop, she stood up and said, I don't think you are listening to what Jyoti is saying. And I've been observing this for 2 days. And that opened up, we were supposed to end it in 10 minutes. We went on for 2 hours. And I think that's the allyship. Allyship is not just, women to man or, things like that, or one gender to another, one representation to another. It's amongst ourselves too. Voice out. If something is not right, voice it out. Be it for whosoever, because eventually we are all together in this as a team. Yeah?
No, so there are perceptions and assumptions, and glad, Khyati, you spoke about it. Breaking these perceptions and assumptions, we should not wait for the end of the year when there is a workshop happening on diversity, we'll bring this up. You should bring it up there and then, because, hit the iron when it's hot, honestly. And that's how organizations will make a change, because by the end of the year, it may be too late to even voice small things that you want done differently to support you at workplace. So great again. I'm now moving on to one last section, which is the role of AI. And when I thought about the role of AI, I said, would AI really play a role? Yes, it does. And a lot of us, and especially all of us on the panel itself, either represent the technology function or are associated with tech companies, and I'm sure a whole lot of you in the audience in a similar manner. So I was reading again a report, which is the UNESCO report, which talks about increasing gender diversity across the AI workforce. And it is noted as important for developing inclusive AI. I just want to know how many of y'all are directly working in the areas of AI or are related with organizations that are fostering AI. I'm hoping all hands will go up or there's a serious concern. So all of us, yes, and yes, I do see hands going up here as well. So great. So the purpose of the UNESCO's dialogue on gender equality and AI was to identify issues, challenges, and good practices. And that was primarily to help overcome the built-in gender biases found in AI devices, data sets, and algorithms. How does that come to workplace? And I'll talk about, 2 significant reasons. So improving, the global representation of women in technical roles and in the boardroom, especially in technology sector. I do remember, Marsh mentioning why is it that all technical roles should have male representation and functions like marketing and HR have female representation. So that point really brings that. And create robust and gender inclusive AI principles, guidelines, code of ethics within the industry. So this really covers the spectrum of bringing gender diversity in organizations that are fostering AI for advancement. And the quick question here, my last question to all 3 of you is, beyond just numerical targets, what strategies are needed to meaningfully integrate and empower women at all levels in companies fostering AI? Can I go with you now?
Sure. Right. So I will use AI and STEM interchangeably, of course. There are concerns around ethics around AI. Again, it stems from misrepresentation. The Amazon example that I gave is very much misrepresentation of the data that we are feeding in. Now, AI is supposed to mimic human emotion. It's supposed to mimic human emotion, look at the problem, predict, plan, and so on. Now, if the data set that is there is not well represented, it will always be skewed. What can we do? Again, one of the similar reports that I was reading said that in the last 2 years, the number of women in STEM have been decreasing, right? Now, how soon can we get women introduced to technology? Now, as I was growing up, I could see a doctor, to become a role model, an air hostess. There was a time when I wanted to be an air hostess, till my mom said, you're going to be keep cleaning up other people's plates, which didn't seem that good. But yeah, you want to be an actor, you want to be a cop, you want to be a model, all of those, right? But you don't see a technologist. How do you inspire young women to say, hey, you know what, you can be a technologist, and there are a lot of other things that you can do. So one is to tap into young minds. Now, at Moody's, we did an initiative with an NGO called Catalyst. So Catalyst, what it does is it enrolls women, girls, who are already studying in STEM and are from underprivileged backgrounds. And what we had done was we ran a 12-week session where they were invited. We trained them on how to be corporate ready, what to expect, what were the newer technologies today. So they learned about design thinking, they learned about DevOps, they learned about cloud, right? And while they were a part of computer science and engineering backgrounds, electronics and so on, they still did not have the exposure about how is it to work in a corporate setting. And to see that so many women were there and they were actually sitting and coding, these girls were phenomenal. I remember the first day when they walked in and they had to introduce themselves, they were very, very conscious. By the end of 10 weeks, they were presenting to the senior most leadership of Moody's, and it was perfect. It was perfect. They had designed the whole system. They'd used design thinking. They did the architecture. They did a 4-layer architecture, in fact. They coded it, and then they had presented an MVP. Now, I have not seen as good a presentation from my own colleagues. They were so perfect. It just is about sparking that, creating that spark, right? So investing in scholarships, making sure, right, for STEM, making sure that the women who are already on board in your organization, now AI is a very nascent field, comparatively nascent, right? Whereas HR, like I was talking about HR and other fields, where there is a dominance or there is a skewness which is already there. I mean, I am sure the number of men who know AI is the same number of women who know AI at this point of time. Should we just invest in continuing this ratio, right? Can we continue to make sure that the women are also, so if there's a training that's going to happen in your organization, ensure that the number of men and women who are attending the training is exactly the same. Make sure that the roles which are identified are given to men and women when it comes to AI equally. This is just the time where we can at least make sure the future of AI has exactly, a good representation on the gender side, and of course every other, diversity factor that we can get in. But definitely when we're talking about gender diversity, we can start off with some of these steps. Thanks.
Over to you, Jyoti. That was a lot she's covered. I hope you have something different to say as well.
No, I think some very good points. Thanks so much. I'll just approach it from a slightly different angle. More like AI, STEM, as you said, of course, these are all engineering, hardcore, technologist, technical areas. When we talk about maybe women are not good enough or those stereotypical questions, maybe somewhere have we women even looked at saying that how confident are we when we are facing a crowd of, say, architects or designers and opening up and being very active in those conversations. In this group itself, I can very well say there are many women technocrats who are very good with their job, right? Sometimes I think we start taking that, okay, things like maybe something that we've been used to of doing, right? Maybe we are good at, people relate to us in a better way, and this is like a new area. If we open up, what if we make some mistakes? I just have to tell you, sometimes it's not only we make mistakes, the other side also makes mistake. So it's just about going with that confidence, having that courage, and most importantly, I'm sure you all would have listened to what Kiran Bailey said in the morning, read every day. When you are reading every day and you are an engineer at heart, you are a technocrat at heart, I can tell you There is nothing that can stop you from not growing in this field. There is nothing like, STEM is science is not for women, or AI is not for women, and women is only for maybe XYZ, whatever is the pigeonholed, concepts which are there. I think it's just that we don't show how well we understand the concepts and how well we can really pull through those conversations where, others are talking on, maybe data mining, or maybe talking about data models, or talking about AGI, or even, as simple as our own architectures. So that's, most of the things you covered. I just wanted to say that there is no harm erring once or twice, but don't give up. Continue to read, continue to do better, because you have so much of resources these days. I remember my time when, you have to go to library and you have to pick up that particular book, and if you're not picking it up, somebody else picks up. So you miss on that information. But that's not the case now. It's lovely times. So I would say there is nothing stopping, be it AI, STEM, or any other engineering. I've heard people say that too. People say, oh, something that you started the question with. But maybe, take this up in your stride, do whatever is needed for us to do that minimum, and come out, voice out, speak up, get into those conversations. And I think we are right there.
It makes me believe some of the world's biggest problems have the simplest solutions. Like Jyoti, you put up that just reading every day could be a great way to make the big change you want in your life. So since time's up, I will just request all our panelists to end in the same note that we started. Maybe give one word at the end of this panel, not to describe yourself, but to describe this whole discussion we've had. I'll start with you. Just one word to sum up our discussion today.
I think it was very reflective. I think we all three of us shared that with the group as well. I think the anecdotes and stories mentioned, people would have struck a chord with several of them, relating to that, their own experiences, and hopefully, thinking about how they can sort of go change things on the ground in their own way, right? So reflective is what I'd say.
Very good. Thank you, reflective. Jyoti, you?
No, I find it engaging, insightful. I just hope and wish it echoes, with the folks out here. But thanks so much.
Okay.
It's very engaging. I mean, we spoke about a lot of things, and though these topics have been spoken about a number of times in the past, but every time there's something more that comes out, and really the crowd and all of us here, it was really engaging. Thanks.
Great. My last word would be, I think, breaking conditioning, talking, a lot of presumptions, assumptions that we come up with. So I think we spoke about all of it, and I do hope the audience here gained as much as we enjoyed putting this show for you all. So thank you so much for your attention through this panel discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Suchita.
Thank you all very much. Unfortunately, we don't have time for questions, but once again, can we hear a huge round of applause for this panel on stage? Thank you all for being with us today. Mr. Photographer would like a picture with you all. So, big smiles.